A waitress slips a Mafia boss a note that says, "Don't eat it, leave now." But instead of running, the man everyone fears grabs her wrist and tells her to sit beside him. That's when she lifts her skirt, revealing a gun strapped to her thigh, and whispers the truth. The food isn't poisoned. The whole room is about to explode. In seconds, everything blows apart, and the two of them are racing through the night. A deadly crime boss and a fake waitress, who was never a waitress at all. She's an assassin with a secret past. And the person who hired her to kill him, someone even closer than his enemies. Now they're trapped together, hunted, betrayed, and forced to trust the one person they shouldn't. But when danger pulls them closer and desire starts to burn hotter than the bullets chasing them, is she the woman who came to save his life, or the one who will destroy it? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The Friday night crowd buzzed through the elegant interior of Salvatore's, one of Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurants. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white tablecloths and gleaming silverware while the city's elite dined on overpriced pasta and wine. But Luca Varone paid no attention to the ambiance his brother had so carefully cultivated. From his corner table, partially concealed by an ornate privacy screen, his dark eyes tracked every movement in the room with predatory focus. Two of his most trusted guards stood nearby, their presence subtle but unmistakable in their fitted black suits. They'd swept the restaurant before his arrival, as they did every establishment he frequented. Tonight was meant to be a simple business dinner, yet something felt off. The hair on the back of his neck prickled with warning. When the waitress approached his table, Luca's attention sharpened. She was new. He knew every staff member in his family's establishments. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down his plate of osso buco, the silverware clinking against fine china. Before he could dismiss her, she slipped a folded piece of paper beside his water glass, then hurried away without meeting his eyes. Luca's jaw tightened as he watched her retreat. The note could be anything from a phone number to a threat, but the waitress's nervous energy suggested the latter. He unfolded the paper carefully, reading the hastily scrawled message. "Don't eat it. Leave now." Instead of the fear or anger another man might feel, a cold smile curved Luca's lips. He raised one finger, and instantly one of his men stepped forward to summon the waitress back to his table. She returned slowly, her shoulders tense beneath her crisp, white uniform shirt. Up close, Luca could see she was older than he'd first assumed. Late 20s perhaps, with sharp intelligence behind her downcast eyes that contradicted her timid demeanor. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. She hesitated, glancing toward the exit where two more of his men now blocked the path. "I should really get back to my other tables." "Sit," Luca repeated, his quiet voice carrying an edge of steel that made it clear this wasn't a request. The waitress, Elena according to her name tag, perched stiffly on the chair's edge. Her hands were steady now, Luca noted with interest. The trembling had been an act. "Explain the note," he said, sliding it across the pristine tablecloth toward her. "I can't." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was steel beneath the softness. Luca leaned closer, letting her feel the full weight of his presence. "You can, and you will. Now." One of his guards shifted forward, but Elena's reaction wasn't what Luca expected. Instead of cowering, she straightened in her chair. With deliberate slowness, she crossed her legs, the movement causing her skirt to ride up just enough to reveal the gun strapped to her thigh. "The meal isn't poisoned, Mr. Varone," she said, her voice suddenly clear and confident. All trace of the timid waitress had vanished. "But this entire room is rigged to explode." The transformation fascinated him even as her words registered as a threat. He studied her more carefully now. The perfect posture, the calculated distance she maintained, the way her eyes constantly scanned the room. This was no ordinary waitress. "Is that so?" Luca kept his tone conversational, even as his mind raced through possibilities. His men tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons, but he halted them with a subtle gesture. "And you're warning me out of the goodness of your heart?" A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Let's just say I have my reasons." Above them, the massive crystal chandelier began to vibrate, sending tiny rainbow refractions dancing across the white tablecloth. Elena's eyes flicked upward, then back to Luca's face. "That's our first warning. We have about 3 minutes before the real show starts." Luca's hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her upper arm in an iron grip as he rose from his chair, pulling her with him. "Then we should leave, together." "That wasn't part of the plan," Elena said, though she made no move to break his hold. Plans change. Luca's dark eyes locked onto hers. You didn't really think I'd let you walk away after this, did you? The chandelier's crystals clinked more insistently now, drawing worried glances from nearby diners. Elena's free hand moved fractionally toward her concealed weapon, but Luca's grip tightened in warning. Don't, he murmured, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. You're good. Very good. But my men will drop you before you clear the holster, and then we'll both miss whatever spectacular show you've arranged. A muscle ticked in Elena's jaw, but she didn't resist as Luca guided her toward the kitchen service entrance, his guards falling into formation around them. The rest of the dining room remained oblivious to the danger, caught up in their expensive meals and meaningless conversations. My brother's going to be furious about losing his restaurant, Luca commented as they walked, his tone almost pleasant, despite the tension thrumming through his body. Better the restaurant than his brother, Elena replied, matching his casual tone even as she tracked the movements of his men with careful eyes. Luca's lip curled slightly. How considerate of you. I don't suppose you'll tell me who hired you. You assume someone hired me. Didn't they? His fingers flexed against her arm. A professional of your caliber doesn't work for free. The question is, were you hired to kill me or to save me? Helena's stride didn't falter, but something flickered in her eyes. Maybe I just couldn't stand by and watch innocent people die. There are no innocent people in my world, Luca said softly. And you're not the type to work as a waitress unless it serves a larger purpose. How long have you been planning this? Days? Weeks? Before she could answer, the vibrations from above intensified. A low hum filled the air, barely perceptible, but setting teeth on edge. Several patrons glanced up nervously at the chandeliers. Time's up, Elena said, trying to pull away, but Luca's grip remained firm. You're coming with me, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument as he quickened their pace toward the kitchen. Consider it payment for the warning. They burst through the swinging doors into organized chaos of clattering pots and shouting chefs. Luca's guards cleared a path through the startled kitchen staff, heading for the service exit at the back. Elena moved with fluid grace, despite Luca's hold on her arm, navigating the cramped space as if she'd memorized every detail. Of course she had, Luca realized. She'd probably mapped multiple escape routes when planning this operation. You can let go now, she said as they approached the exit. I've done what I came to do. You've done part of what you came to do, Luca corrected her. The rest of your mission, and your employer, are details I'm very interested in discussing. Somewhere more private. The humming grew louder, and Elena's expression tightened. We need to move faster. Luca didn't waste breath arguing. He pulled her through the service door into the back alley where a sleek black SUV already idled, driver alert and waiting. His security team had protocols for every scenario, including rapid evacuation. After you, he said, gesturing Elena toward the vehicle with exaggerated courtesy. When she hesitated, his voice hardened. Don't make this difficult. You're either getting in voluntarily or my men will assist you. Your choice. Elena's eyes narrowed, but she allowed him to guide her into the SUV's leather interior. Luca slid in beside her as his guards took positions around the vehicle. The door had barely closed when the driver pulled away from the curb, merging smoothly into Friday night traffic. They made it half a block before the first explosion lit up the night behind them, followed quickly by two more. The SUV's windows were tinted and bulletproof, but they couldn't completely muffle the sound of breaking glass and screaming metal as Salvatore's prestigious restaurant collapsed in on itself. Through the bustling kitchen, Luca maintained his iron grip on Elena's arm as they navigated between startled line cooks and servers. The fabricated timidity she'd shown earlier had vanished, replaced by precise movements that betrayed her training. She guided them with urgent efficiency, her voice low and clipped. 3 primary charges. First is behind the wine storage, second under the main dining floor, third in the ceiling above your table, secondary devices on the gas lines. Her eyes darted to the industrial stoves. We have maybe 40 seconds. Luca's security detail moved ahead, clearing kitchen staff from their path. Everyone out, one guard barked, flashing a badge that sent workers scrambling toward the exits. 35 seconds, Elena counted, tugging Luca toward a narrow service corridor. This way. It's the fastest route. He matched her pace stride for stride, noting how naturally she navigated the warren of back hallways. She'd clearly spent weeks mapping every inch of this place, learning its rhythms, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Or to save him. He still wasn't certain which. Your brother's staff will trigger the fire alarms, she said, leading them past stacked boxes and cleaning supplies. Most civilians should clear the blast radius. Most, Luca's voice carried a dangerous edge. I did what I could to minimize casualties. The timing, the warning systems, the planted evidence that'll lead investigators to your rivals. She glanced at him. Would you prefer I'd let you eat that plate and die never knowing who wanted you dead? Before he could respond, the first tremors shook the building. Fine dust drifted from the ceiling as the vibrations intensified. Elena's pace quickened. 20 seconds, we need to move faster. They burst through the service exit into a narrow alley lined with dumpsters and delivery trucks. Luca's security team had already established a perimeter, weapons drawn as they scanned rooftops and shadows. The heavy metal door clanged shut behind them just as the first explosion rocked the building. The blast wave hit like a physical force, driving them forward as glass shattered and masonry crumbled. Luca instinctively pulled Elena closer, shielding her as debris rained down. The second explosion followed immediately, then the third, each more powerful than the last. The ground shook violently as sections of the restaurant collapsed inward. Heat washed over them in waves as flames erupted through broken windows. The acrid smell of smoke and explosives filled the air, along with the distant sounds of screaming and car alarms. Emergency lights cast everything in an eerie red glow, reflecting off the settling dust and smoke. Boss, we need to move! One of his guards shouted over the chaos. Police response time to this neighborhood is under 4 minutes. But Luca held his ground, keeping Elena firmly in his grip as he studied her face in the flickering emergency lights. Gone was any trace of the meek waitress who'd approached his table earlier. Her eyes were sharp and alert, constantly assessing threats and escape routes. Her posture spoke of extensive combat training. Who are you really, Marie? He demanded. She met his gaze steadily. You already know. Say it. I'm an assassin. No hesitation, no shame. I was contracted to eliminate you tonight. Yet here I stand. He moved closer, towering over her. Why the warning? Why risk exposing yourself? Before she could answer, gunfire erupted from the far end of the alley. Luca's security team returned fire as dark figures emerged from the smoke. Elena tensed, her hand moving toward her concealed weapon, but Luca was faster. He yanked her toward the waiting SUV, ducking as bullets pinged off the armored exterior. Inside, now! He practically lifted her into the vehicle, following close behind as his men provided cover fire. The leather interior was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, sound dampened and climate controlled. Drive, Luca ordered as the last guard dove into the passenger seat. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as they accelerated away from the burning restaurant. Elena sat rigidly beside him, her expression calculating as she watched the rearview mirror. More explosions lit up the night behind them, secondary devices detonating as fire reached the gas lines. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as emergency responders converged on the scene. Your security detail is well trained, she observed coolly. That evacuation protocol was impressive. As was your intel gathering. Luca's voice was deceptively calm. How long did you work undercover at Salvatore's? Learning schedules, studying layouts, watching my routine. Long enough to know you always sit at that same corner table, always order the same wine, always keep your back to the wall and your eyes on the door. She turned to face him fully. Long enough to know someone close to you wants you dead. The SUV swerved around a corner, tires squealing as they put distance between themselves and the chaos. Red and blue lights flashed in the side mirrors as emergency vehicles rushed past in the opposite direction. They merged smoothly into regular traffic, becoming just another luxury vehicle in the city's Friday night flow. Luca studied her with lethal intensity, taking in every detail. The waitress uniform that had seemed so ordinary now revealed subtle tailoring to accommodate hidden weapons. Her hands, though delicate, showed calluses consistent with extensive firearms training. Even her posture had transformed. Gone was the servile slouch, replaced by the coiled readiness of a predator. You're coming with me, he said simply. Not a request or a threat, just a statement of fact. Am I? Her lip curled slightly. And if I refuse? That's not an option. He gestured to the tinted windows and armored doors. You've made yourself my problem now. Whether you intended to save my life or take it, you know too much to simply walk away. I could have let you die tonight, she reminded him. Instead, I warned you. That should earn me something. It earned you a seat in this car instead of a bullet. His voice hardened. Don't mistake pragmatism for mercy. You'll tell me everything. Who hired you? What they told you? Why they want me dead? And then maybe, if I'm satisfied with your answers, we can discuss terms. Elena's eyes narrowed as she calculated odds and options. The guards were watching her every move. The vehicle was armored, the doors electronically locked. Even if she could overpower Luca, which wasn't guaranteed given his size and obvious combat experience, she'd never fight her way through his entire security team. More sirens Dopplered past as they drove deeper into the city. The orange glow of the burning restaurant was barely visible now. Just another crisis in a city that had seen too many. In the distance, news helicopters were already circling the scene like vultures. Luca hadn't taken his eyes off her, his expression unreadable in the passing streetlights. Elena forced herself to breathe steadily, mind racing as she assessed her rapidly dwindling options. She'd prepared for many scenarios tonight, but being trapped in a car with her target hadn't been one of them. The SUV wound through the darkened streets, following a circuitous route to throw off any possible tails. Neither Luca nor Elena spoke again, the silence heavy with unasked questions and unspoken threats. Each was taking the measure of the other, recognizing a worthy opponent. Behind them, smoke continued to rise into the night sky as Salvatore's restaurant burned, taking with it any evidence of Elena's true identity or purpose. Ahead lay uncertainty, a dangerous game of cat and mouse between an assassin and her target, neither fully sure who was truly hunting whom. The city lights streaked past the tinted windows as the SUV wound through the empty streets. Elena could feel Luca's penetrating stare, his presence filling the confined space with unspoken tension. She knew what had to come next, the truth that would either save her life or end it. "Your brother Salvatore planned this," she said quietly, watching his expression shift. "He hired me 3 months ago, paid well above my usual rate to infiltrate the restaurant and gain his trust. The explosives were his idea." Luca's jaw tightened, but his voice remained eerily controlled. "Continue." "He wanted it to look like a rival family's attack. The explosives were military grade, traceable to the Calabrese clan." Elena met his, gazed steadily. "But I did my own research, found irregularities in the contract, realized this was an inside job, a coup attempt. And yet you warned me." His words carried deadly weight. "Why risk your life for a target?" "Professional integrity." She gave a bitter smile. "I don't appreciate being manipulated into someone else's family feud. Your brother didn't just want you dead. He wanted to start a war using my skills as the match." The SUV descended into an underground parking garage, concrete walls replacing the city views. Elena tracked their location through subtle markers, 3 levels down, past 2 security checkpoints. The vehicle finally stopped in a private bay lined with gleaming black cars. Armed guards materialized from the shadows as Luca stepped out, their weapons trained on Elena as she emerged. The garage's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across their faces, making everyone look more dangerous than they already were. "This way," Luca commanded, leading her toward a brushed steel door. The security panel recognized his fingerprint, admitting them into a stark hallway. Everything was minimalist efficiency, polished concrete floors, recessed lighting, and cameras tracking their every move. Elena cataloged escape routes and choke points as they walked, her assassin's training never truly dormant. The hall opened into a Spartanly furnished room, 1 steel table, 2 chairs, and mirrors that were obviously one-way glass, an interrogation chamber designed to break spirits. One of the guards moved to secure her, but Elena was faster. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, following with a knee strike that would have crushed his windpipe if Luca hadn't intercepted. His hand locked around her throat, driving her back against the wall with frightening speed and precision. "Impressive," he murmured, close enough that she could feel his breath. But ultimately futile. His grip was iron, but carefully measured, enough pressure to control, not harm. "You have 2 choices now, Elena. Ally with me against my brother's betrayal, or die as collateral damage when I crush his rebellion. Choose quickly." She glared up at him, pulse racing where his fingers pressed against her carotid. "And if I help you? What guarantee do I have that you won't dispose of me afterward?" "You don't." His honesty was refreshing, at least. "But I protect what's mine. Help me, and you'll have earned that protection, assuming you survive." Elena forced her muscles to relax, showing submission while her mind raced through scenarios. Survival meant playing along, at least until better options presented themselves. "I choose alliance." Luca studied her face for long moments before releasing his hold. "Wise choice." He turned to his men, voice clipped with authority. "I want the city locked down. Find my brother, track his movements, his contacts, his resources, but do not engage without my direct order." The guards dispersed efficiently, leaving them alone in the stark room. Luca gestured for Elena to follow, leading her to a private elevator. The cab was lined with rich mahogany and brass, an incongruous touch of luxury in the fortress-like complex. "Your accommodations will be more comfortable than this room," he said as they ascended, "but no less secure." The elevator opened directly into a penthouse suite that managed to be both opulent and minimalist. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular city views, while subtle security features betrayed its true purpose as a gilded cage. Every pane was bulletproof, every door controlled by biometric locks, every angle covered by hidden cameras. "The entire floor is sealed," Luca informed her, watching as she took in her surroundings. "My personal security monitors all access. The windows don't open. The ventilation system is reinforced against gas attacks. Even if you somehow breach the outer defenses, there are 40 floors between you and the ground." Elena walked to the windows, noting the faint police lights still visible around the burning restaurant in the distance. "Impressive security, but unnecessary if I'm truly your ally. Consider it insurance of your continued cooperation." He moved to stand behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You'll stay here, under my direct supervision, until I'm convinced of your loyalty. And how long might that take?" "That depends entirely on you." His reflection in the glass showed the ghost of a smile. "And on how useful you prove in dismantling my brother's plot." Elena turned to face him, measuring the distance between them. "I've already proved useful by saving your life." "You've proved interesting," he corrected. "Useful remains to be seen." His dark eyes held hers. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you'll tell me everything you know about Salvatore's plans. Every detail, every contact, every whispered conversation you overheard while playing waitress in his restaurant. And if I don't know enough to satisfy you, then we'll have to find other ways for you to prove your value." The threat and promise in his voice sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. "The suite is yours. My quarters are through those doors. Don't bother trying to break into them. The security system will incapacitate you before you cross the threshold." He turned to leave, pausing at the entrance to his private wing. "One last thing, Elena. The next time you attempt to attack one of my men, I won't be so gentle in stopping you. Remember that." The door sealed behind him with a soft click, leaving Elena alone in the luxurious prison. She did a careful sweep of the space, noting cameras, sensors, and potential weak points. The furnishings were expensive but sparse: a king-size bed, sleek furniture, and a bathroom stocked with high-end toiletries. Everything a captive assassin might need, except freedom. Outside, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds, oblivious to the power struggle unfolding in its shadows. Somewhere out there, Salvatore was surely planning his next move, unaware that his hired killer had switched sides. Elena pressed her forehead against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the surface. She'd chosen survival, but at what cost? Luca Veroni was arguably more dangerous than his brother, colder, more controlled, and far more intelligent. She'd seen enough to know he would show no mercy to enemies, real or perceived. Her only chance was to make herself indispensable before he decided she'd outlived her usefulness. The city lights blurred as exhaustion finally caught up with her. She'd been running on adrenaline since the explosion, and now her body demanded rest. The bed looked inviting, despite her reluctance to lower her guard in enemy territory. But this was her reality now, a lethal game of trust and betrayal, with her life hanging in the balance. She'd chosen her path when she slipped Luca that warning note. All she could do now was see it through, and hope she'd backed the right brother in this dangerous family feud. Elena moved through the penthouse like a caged animal, taking in every detail of her gilded prison. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the glass was clearly reinforced, thick enough to stop a bullet. Her fingers traced along the window frame, finding no weak points, no possible escape route. The electronic locks on every door glowed with subtle red lights, requiring fingerprint and code authentication. Through the frosted glass walls, she could make out the silhouettes of 2 guards stationed outside the main entrance. Their shadows remained motionless, professional, but their presence was an unmistakable reminder of her captivity. The decor spoke of wealth and refined taste: Italian leather furniture, original artwork, marble countertops in the open kitchen. But beneath the luxury lay purpose-built security features that transformed the space into an elaborate trap. Motion sensors nestled in corners. Camera lenses glinted from discreet ceiling mounts. Even the ventilation grates were welded shut. "Sit!" Luca's voice cut through her assessment. He gestured to the chair across from him at the dining table, his tone leaving no room for argument. Elena took the offered seat, maintaining perfect posture despite her exhaustion. The explosion, the flight, the fight, it had all taken its toll. But she couldn't show weakness. Not here, not with him. "Now," Lucas said, leaning forward slightly. "You're going to tell me everything. Who trained you? What was your price? And most importantly, why warn me instead of completing your assignment?" His dark eyes fixed on her face, reading every micro-expression. Elena met his gaze steadily, knowing lies would only make her situation worse. "I was trained by a private network," she began. "Former military and intelligence operators who now work in the shadows. The training took 5 years, combat, weapons, infiltration, everything needed to become invisible until the moment of strike. The price? $2 million, half upfront, half on completion." Luca's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Expensive. My brother was quite invested in my demise." "The money wasn't why I warned you," Elena said quietly. "I changed my mind when I realized the explosion would kill everyone in that restaurant. Waiters, kitchen staff, families with children, dozens of innocent people. That crosses a line I won't step over." "A moral assassin?" His tone carried a hint of amusement. "That's a dangerous contradiction." "I have a code. It's what separates me from common killers." She lifted her chin. "My targets are carefully chosen, no collateral damage, no innocent deaths." "And yet you accepted a contract that involved bombing a crowded restaurant." "I was told it would be a precise hit. Salvatore lied about the scale of his plans." Her hands clenched briefly. "When I discovered the truth, I couldn't go through with it." Luca studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Your honesty is refreshing, but don't mistake it for trust." "Then let me leave," Elena said. "I've blown my cover. I'm no use to either side now." "No." The word fell like a stone between them. "You're tied to my survival now. My world doesn't let people simply walk away, especially not those who know too much." "I won't betray your secrets." "Perhaps not willingly." Luca rose, moving to the bar cart near the windows. "But my brother has ways of making people talk, methods that would make your training seem gentle by comparison." He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, bringing one to her. "Besides, you've proven yourself useful. Someone with your skills could be valuable in the coming war." Elena accepted the drink but didn't taste it. "I don't take sides in family feuds." "You already have." He returned to his seat. "The moment you slipped me that note, you chose a side. Now you'll see it through." The city lights began to twinkle as dusk settled over the skyline. Luca watched the play of shadows across her face, noting the calculation in her eyes. Without warning, he reached across and drew her gun from its thigh holster. Elena tensed but didn't resist as he examined the weapon. After a moment, he set it aside and pulled a different pistol from his jacket, sleeker, newer, custom-made. "This is yours now," he said, sliding it across the table. "If you run, you'll need it. But you still won't make it past my men." She picked up the gun, testing its weight. "Is this a test?" "Consider it a gesture of pragmatism. I prefer you armed than defenseless if my brother's men find you." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I suggest you remember who holds the true power here." Hours later, Elena lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The bed was obscenely comfortable, the sheets Egyptian cotton, but sleep eluded her. Her mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds, searching for weaknesses in the security. The new gun sat on the nightstand, both promise and threat. She could feel the weight of surveillance, knowing cameras monitored her every move. The windows showed a glittering expanse of city, 40 stories of empty air between her and the ground. No rope could span that distance. No amount of skill could overcome those odds. She rolled onto her side, listening to the quiet hum of the climate control system. Her training had prepared her for capture, for torture, for death, but not for this elegant imprisonment. Not for the complex game Luca Verone was playing. Outside her door, Luca stood in the darkness, listening to her restless movements. His guards remained at their posts, his security systems functioned perfectly, but still he found himself drawn to this vigil. Perhaps it was instinct, honed by years of survival. Perhaps it was something else, something in her fierce independence that called to his own carefully controlled nature. He heard her shift again, the whisper of expensive sheets against skin. Her breathing hadn't settled into the rhythm of sleep. She was planning, analyzing, searching for escape routes that didn't exist. It was what he would do in her position. The night stretched on, a silent battle of wills. Elena remained awake, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. And Luca maintained his watch, patient as a predator, knowing that sometimes the most effective cage was one the prisoner built themselves. In the distance, sirens wailed, perhaps still dealing with the aftermath of the restaurant explosion. The sound faded, swallowed by the city's endless rhythm of life and death, power and submission, victory and defeat. Whatever tomorrow brought, both captor and captive knew there would be no easy escape from the web they'd woven between them. Dawn crept through the reinforced windows of Luca's penthouse as Elena followed him into his operations room. The space hummed with technology, wall-mounted screens displaying security feeds, financial data, and surveillance reports. A massive digital map of the city dominated the central display, certain areas highlighted in pulsing red. "Sit!" Luca commanded, gesturing to a chair beside his at the main console. His shoulder brushed hers as he leaned forward, pulling up encrypted files. "Tell me everything you know about my brother's plan. Timing, resources, personnel?" Elena studied the data scrolling past. "He's been planning this for months. The explosion was meant to look like a rival family's attack, create chaos while he seized control of your territory. And you?" Luca's eyes cut to her face. "How long were you involved?" 2 weeks. I was contracted through intermediaries. Never met him directly." Luca's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up property records and shell companies. He's not stupid enough to use his known locations. Where would he hide? Based on the mercenary. Teams he hired. Somewhere industrial. Easy access routes. Minimal civilians. Elena pointed to several waterfront districts. These areas would give him space for weapon storage and quick escape options. "Too obvious," Luca countered. "He knows those would be my first targets." Heat crackled between them as she turned to face him. "You're underestimating him. He's counting on you overthinking this, expecting elaborate schemes when the simple answer is right there. And you're underestimating me." Luca's voice dropped dangerously low. "I taught him everything he knows about strategy. If he's using obvious locations, it's because he wants me to find them. Or because he's arrogant enough to think you won't survive long enough to look," Elena shot back. Their faces were inches apart now, the argument charged with something beyond professional disagreement. Elena could see flecks of gold in Luca's dark eyes, feel the coiled tension in his body. His cologne filled her senses, expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and smoke. Luca opened his mouth to respond, but a thunderous explosion rocked the building before he could speak. The blast came from below, powerful enough to make the windows rattle in their frames. Alarms blared as smoke began seeping through the ventilation system. "Down!" Luca shouted, yanking Elena to the floor as gunfire erupted in the hallway outside. He drew his weapon in one fluid motion, moving to cover the door while tapping rapid commands into his phone. "Your brother's mercenaries?" Elena asked, already knowing the answer as she pulled out her own gun. "Yes. Security cameras show at least 15 men, heavily armed. They've breached the lower floors." Luca's eyes darted to a panel in the wall that looked slightly different from its surroundings. "We need to move! Now!" He grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the panel, which slid open at his touch to reveal a narrow corridor. They had barely entered when the operations room door burst open behind them. Elena spun, firing 2 precise shots that dropped the first attacker before he could raise his weapon. The hidden passage was dimly lit by emergency strips along the floor, leading them through the building's skeleton. Luca moved with lethal grace, taking point as they descended. When 2 mercenaries appeared at an intersection ahead, he eliminated them with mechanical efficiency. 1 shot each, center mass. They encountered 3 more attackers near a service junction. In the confined space, the firefight was brutal and close. Elena saw 1 gunman taking aim at Luca's exposed back and reacted instinctively. Her bullet caught the man in the throat, spraying blood across the industrial walls. Luca gave her a sharp nod of acknowledgement as they pressed forward. The passage ended at what appeared to be a maintenance closet, but when Luca pressed his palm to a hidden scanner, the back wall separated to reveal a private elevator. "Security override engaged," a computerized voice announced as they stepped inside. "Descending to sublevel 6. The elevator dropped faster than standard speed, making Elena's stomach lurch. She used the moment to reload, noting that Luca did the same. Their breathing was slightly elevated from the fight, but neither showed signs of panic. "Why didn't your brother's men know about these passages?" she asked. "Because I had them installed secretly after he started acting suspicious 3 months ago." Luca's expression was grim. "I've learned to plan for betrayal." The elevator opened directly into an underground parking tunnel, spotlessly clean and clearly private. A sleek black SUV waited, engine already running. One of Luca's most trusted lieutenants stood beside it, phone to his ear. Report, Luca barked as they approached. Building is compromised, but evacuation protocols are active. All essential personnel are being relocated to secure locations. No confirmation on total hostile numbers yet. Take separate routes to the secondary safe house. No direct communication until you receive authentication codes. Luca opened the SUV's driver door, gesturing for Elena to get in the passenger seat. And Marco, if my brother makes contact, kill him. They peeled out of the tunnel, emerging onto a service road that connected to the city's underground network. Luca drove with controlled aggression, taking corners at speeds that should have been impossible for a vehicle that size. Elena kept her weapon ready, watching their six. Your brother will assume you're dead in the explosion, she said after several minutes of tense silence. Good. It gives us an advantage. Luca's hands were steady on the wheel as they surfaced onto a highway leading out of the city. But it also means he'll move quickly to consolidate power, and now he knows you've chosen sides. Elena didn't bother denying it. Her actions in the firefight had made her position clear. She'd protected Luca without hesitation, burning her bridges with his brother's faction. The city lights began to fade behind them as they drove into the night. Their hearts were still pounding from the adrenaline, bodies humming with residual battle energy. The war had officially begun, and Elena realized she was now as much a target as Luca. There would be no neutral ground, no walking away. She glanced at his profile, sharp against the dashboard lights. He seemed to sense her attention, turning slightly to meet her gaze. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of their forced alliance becoming something more complex, more dangerous. The SUV ate up the dark miles as they fled toward the safe house, both knowing that tomorrow would bring new battles, new challenges. But for now, they were alive, they were moving, and they had proven they could fight together. It would have to be enough. The safe house emerged from the pre-dawn darkness like a ghost. A modest two-story cabin nestled against thick pine forest. Luca pulled the SUV around back, cutting the engine. They sat in silence for a moment, listening for any signs of pursuit. Clear, Elena murmured, scanning the tree line. Her professional instincts hadn't dulled, despite exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. Luca led them to a hidden keypad beneath loose siding, entering a complex sequence. The back door clicked open. Inside, the safe house was spartanly furnished but clean, clearly maintained but rarely used. Elena's trained eye cataloged exits, weapons caches poorly disguised as decor, and security measures that would make breaking out as difficult as breaking in. One bedroom upstairs, Luca stated, watching her assessment. Couch down here, Elena's jaw tightened. I'll take the couch. No, his voice was firm. You take the bed. I need to be down here to monitor the security feeds. I'm not sleeping upstairs while you guard the only exit. She crossed her arms, meeting his stare. I'll take the couch. The tension between them crackled, neither willing to back down. Finally, Luca's mouth quirked slightly. Still don't trust me? You're holding me prisoner. I'm keeping you alive. His eyes dropped to her arm, where her sleeve was torn and stained with blood. That needs cleaning. Before she could protest, he strode to a cabinet and retrieved a first aid kit. Elena remained tense as he approached, but allowed him to guide her to sit on the couch. His fingers were surprisingly gentle as he rolled up her sleeve, revealing a deep graze from their earlier firefight. This might sting, he warned, applying antiseptic with careful precision. Elena watched his face as he worked, struck by the contradiction. These same hands had killed multiple men hours ago with cold efficiency. Yet now they moved with such tenderness over her skin, cleaning the wound with meticulous care. The gentleness was more unnerving than his violence had been. You're good at this, she said, trying to break the intimate silence. Necessity. He began wrapping gauze around her arm. In my world, you learn to patch yourself up or you don't survive long. When he finished, his fingers lingered for a fraction too long on her skin. Elena pulled away, standing abruptly. Thank you. Luca watched her retreat to the window, noting how she positioned herself to watch both him and the approach to the house. Hungry? She hadn't eaten since before the restaurant explosion, but survival training taught her to be wary of food from potential enemies. As if reading her thoughts, Luca smiled grimly. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't waste poison. He moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets. Besides, I'll be eating too. Elena's stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl. Fine, she observed as he efficiently gathered ingredients, moving through the kitchen with unexpected familiarity. You cook? When necessary. He cracked eggs into a bowl. Regular staff is gone, and I prefer knowing exactly what goes into my food. The Domestic normalcy of watching a mafia boss prepare breakfast was surreal. Elena perched on a bar stool, maintaining distance while he worked. Soon, the kitchen filled with the smell of eggs, toast, and coffee. Luca placed a plate before her, then made his own. They ate in silence until he finally spoke. "Tell me about your father." Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What?" "You're trained, professional. But this wasn't just about money for you." His eyes held hers. "Why did you really take the contract?" The food turned to ash in her mouth. Elena set down her fork, memories surfacing like sharks in dark water. "My father was murdered 10 years ago. Small business owner, no enemies, no debts. Just executed in our home." Luca remained silent, waiting. The killer wore a ring. Her voice turned hard. "Your family's crest." She watched shock flicker across his face before his expression smoothed. "You're certain?" "I memorized every detail of that ring while hiding in the closet, watching through the slats." Her hands clenched. "I was 17. Understanding dawned in Luca's eyes. "So you joined the Shadow Network for revenge?" Elena nodded. "They found me first, actually, recognized my potential, offered training, resources, connections, everything I'd need to eventually find my father's killer." "And my brother's contract seemed like the perfect opportunity," Luca concluded. "Access to your family's inner circle?" "Yes," she met his gaze. "But I didn't expect what? Complications." She gestured between them. "This." Luca absorbed her story in silence, mind already working to verify details, cross-reference timelines. 10 years ago, his father still controlled the family. Many wore the crest ring, but few had authority to order hits. If Elena was telling the truth, this went deeper than his brother's betrayal. Exhaustion began creeping in as morning light filtered through the windows. Elena's shoulders drooped despite her efforts to stay alert. Luca recognized the bone-deep weariness of someone running on pure adrenaline for too long. "Sleep," he ordered softly. "You're no use to either of us dead on your feet." She started to argue, but a massive yawn betrayed her. "Fine, but I'm still taking the couch." Luca didn't protest this time, simply retrieving blankets from a closet. Elena arranged herself on the couch, gun within easy reach. She expected Luca to retreat upstairs, but instead he settled into an armchair with clear sightlines to both her and the entrance. "What are you doing?" she mumbled, already half asleep. "Watching the perimeter," he replied, though his eyes remained fixed on her. Elena wanted to object, to maintain her defensive walls, but exhaustion pulled her under. The last thing she registered was the steady rhythm of Luca's breathing nearby and the strange sense of security it provided. Luca sat motionless in his chair, dividing his attention between the security feeds on his phone and Elena's sleeping form. He told himself he was simply guarding a valuable asset, someone with critical information about his brother's coup. But something deeper kept him rooted there, watching over her rest with an intensity that surprised even him. Morning light crept across the floor as both assassin and mafia boss gave in to exhaustion. She curled beneath blankets on the couch, he maintaining his vigilant posture in the chair. Outside, birds began their morning songs, oblivious to the deadly game of survival playing out within the safe house walls. For now, in this temporary sanctuary, predator and prey dozed in uneasy proximity. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new revelations, new reasons to trust or doubt. But for these quiet hours, they allowed themselves this fragile peace, each privately wondering how long it could last. The sun climbed higher, warming the room as they slept. Elena's breathing had deepened, some of the tension finally leaving her face. Luca's head dipped slightly, though his hand remained near his weapon. Natural light illuminated them both, the assassin who chose mercy, the mafia boss who showed gentleness, two deadly forces gravitating toward an alliance neither had expected. Early afternoon sunlight filtered through the safe house windows when Elena stirred. Her muscles protested from sleeping on the couch, but she'd endured worse. Across the room, Luca was already awake, his sharp gaze fixed on his phone screen while he typed rapid messages. "Your men find anything?" she asked, voice still rough with sleep. "Nothing concrete yet." He set the phone down. "We're stuck here until they sweep the city thoroughly." Elena stood, stretching carefully. "Wonderful! Trapped in a safe house with a man who probably still wants to kill me. If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have woken up." His tone was matter-of-fact. She moved to the kitchen, rifling through cabinets until she found coffee supplies. The familiar ritual of measuring grounds and starting the machine gave her something to focus on, besides Luca's presence. He followed her, leaning against the doorframe. "How does someone with your skills end up as a hired gun?" he asked. "You clearly have a code. You could have let that explosion kill me and everyone else." "Not everyone follows your family's murder first. Ask questions later approach." She kept her back to him, watching coffee drip into the pot. "No, you just accept contracts on specific targets instead." Elena whirled to face him. "You really want to discuss morality? Fine. I've seen more honor among criminals than politicians. At least you're honest about what you are." "And what exactly am I?" Luca pushed off the doorframe, stepping closer. "A killer, a boss, a man who thinks power means control." She held her ground as he advanced. "But you're not as cold as you pretend to be." He moved forward until she was trapped between his body and the counter, his hands gripping the edge on either side of her. "No?" His voice dropped lower. "Tell me, Elena, what am I really like?" She should have felt threatened, should have reached for a weapon or planned an escape. Instead, heat bloomed in her chest as she met his gaze. "You're dangerous," she said softly. "But not to everyone. You protect what's yours." "And what makes you think you know me so well?" His face was inches from hers now. "Because I've been watching you for weeks, learning your patterns, your habits." She tilted her chin up. "The way you treat your people, how you handle threats. You're brutal when necessary, but never cruel for its own sake." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps at her observation, or appreciation for her thoroughness. The air between them grew thick with tension as neither moved away. His phone buzzed sharply, shattering the moment. Luca stepped back, checking the message. His expression darkened. "What is it?" Elena asked. "Someone inside my organization leaked our location to my brother." He showed her the message, security footage of one of his trusted lieutenants making a call from a burner phone. The circle of people who knew about this safe house was small. Elena absorbed this new information. "So we can't trust your usual network?" "No. We're more isolated than I thought." He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of frustration she'd seen from him. "Every person who might help could be compromised. Then we work with what we have." Elena moved to the living room, spreading maps across the coffee table. "Show me everywhere your brother has influence. Properties, businesses, allies." Luca joined her on the floor, their shoulders brushing as they leaned over the maps. He marked locations with quick precision, explaining connections and hierarchies. Elena added her own intelligence, surveillance details from her weeks of preparation, patterns she'd noticed. Hours passed as they built a picture of his brother's network. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across their work. Neither mentioned dinner or rest, too focused on their task. Security footage played silently on Luca's laptop, showing various locations under surveillance. "There," Elena pointed to a warehouse district. 3 of his known associates entered that building within the last 2 days. "It's not on your family's official holdings." "Good catch." Luca leaned closer to study the footage, his breath warm against her cheek. "That area is supposed to be abandoned." She turned to add another observation and found his face inches from hers. The earlier tension returned instantly, crackling between them like lightning before a storm. His eyes dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to meet her gaze. Neither moved away, neither spoke. The maps lay forgotten between them as the room grew darker, security footage casting blue light across their features. Elena felt her pulse quicken, aware of every point where their bodies connected. Shoulder, thigh, the brush of his hand against hers as they both braced against the floor. Luca's expression remained unreadable, but his body betrayed him. She felt the slight increase in his breathing, saw his pupils dilate. He wanted her. The realization sent heat spiraling through her core. And despite every reason to maintain distance, to remember their roles as captor and prisoner, she wanted him too. The attraction hung heavy in the air, unacknowledged, but impossible to ignore. Both too proud, too cautious to be the first to break this stalemate. Both aware that acting on this desire would irreversibly complicate their already precarious alliance. So they remained frozen in that moment as night settled around them, 2 predators recognizing something familiar in each other, something that went beyond their current roles as reluctant allies. The warehouse footage continued its silent play, ignored now in favor of this wordless challenge between them. Elena felt the warmth of him all along her side, the subtle strength in his frame. Luca's fingers twitched against hers where their hands rested on the floor, but he didn't pull away. Neither did she. The maps crinkled softly beneath them as they shifted minutely closer, drawn by some magnetic force neither was willing to name. The safe house grew quieter as evening deepened, highlighting their isolation. No backup coming, no easy escape from this situation or from each other. Just them, this room, and the dangerous attraction neither had anticipated when their paths first crossed. The quiet hum of running water filled the safe house as Elena showered, trying to wash away the tension of the day. Through the bathroom door, Luca paced the hallway, his instincts on high alert. Something felt wrong. A soft beep from his phone confirmed his suspicions. The perimeter sensors were triggering in sequence. Someone was approaching methodically, professionally. Without hesitation, Luca burst through the bathroom door. Elena spun around, water streaming down her body. But before she could protest, he grabbed her wrist. "We have company." She read the urgency in his expression and moved instantly, wrapping a towel around herself as he pulled her toward the hidden weapons cache behind a false wall panel. Gunfire erupted outside, shattering windows and splintering wood. "Elite mercenaries," Luca explained, passing her a spare set of clothes and weapons. "My brother's favorites." Elena dressed quickly, checking the ammunition in her gun. "How many?" "At least 8, maybe more." He positioned himself at the corner, listening to the precise movement of boots through broken glass. They're well-trained, moving in formation. They shared a look of understanding before moving into the hallway. Elena fell into position behind him naturally, covering their rear as they advanced. The first mercenary appeared at the end of the corridor. Luca took him down with 2 silent shots. More attackers converged from both directions, forcing them back to back in the narrow space. Elena felt Luca's shoulders tense against hers as they moved in perfect synchronization, their bodies somehow knowing how to read each other's movements. A flash of movement caught Elena's attention too late. A mercenary emerged from a side room, his rifle aimed at her head. Before she could react, Luca spun around, something primal and deadly transforming his features. He attacked with savage precision, disarming the man and snapping his neck in one fluid motion. "Move!" Elena shouted, spotting more shadows approaching. They fought their way toward the basement, Luca leading them to a concealed tunnel entrance behind old storage shelves. The passage was narrow and damp, forcing them to run bent over through absolute darkness. Elena kept one hand on Luca's back, following his sure movements through the maze-like structure. Behind them, voices echoed as their pursuers discovered the tunnel. They emerged into a dense forest, the pre-dawn air sharp in their lungs. Luca oriented himself quickly, guiding them east through the trees. They ran for what felt like hours, the sound of pursuit gradually fading into the distance. The sun was rising when they finally reached a small cabin, well hidden among thick pines. Luca swept the interior while Elena secured the perimeter, both moving with the efficiency of people used to surviving. Once inside, the adrenaline crash hit hard. Elena's muscles trembled from exertion, her skin marked with scratches from their forest sprint. Luca looked equally battered, a bruise darkening along his jaw. "What the hell were you thinking?" he suddenly demanded, rounding on her. "You hesitated with that first attacker. He nearly killed you." Elena bristled at his tone. "I had him in my sights. You're the one who broke formation to play hero." "Because you were being reckless," Luca advanced on her, his eyes blazing. "If anything had happened to you—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. "What?" Elena challenged, stepping closer. "Since when do you care what happens to me? I'm just your prisoner, remember?" The tension between them shifted, charged with something beyond anger. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips, his breathing heavy. He moved closer, one hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. For a moment, Elena thought he would kiss her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she felt the heat of his body, saw the conflict raging in his eyes. But at the last second, Luca pulled away, turning his back to her. "Get some rest," he said roughly. "We move again at nightfall." They settled on opposite sides of the small cabin, Elena on an old cot, Luca against the wall near the door. Though exhaustion weighed heavily on them both, sleep remained elusive. Elena could feel Luca's eyes on her in the growing light, just as she couldn't stop watching the way his fingers absently traced the gun in his lap. The morning birds began their chorus outside, but inside the cabin, silence reigned. Neither spoke of the almost kiss, of the way they'd moved together during the fight, of the growing thing between them that was becoming harder to deny. The morning light filtered through the cabin's dusty windows as Luca built a fire in the small stone hearth. Elena watched him from her cot, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. His movements were precise, controlled, like everything else about him. "Come here," he said softly, not looking up from the growing flames. Tell me about your father. Elena hesitated before settling beside him on the worn floorboards. He owned a small bakery. Everyone loved him. Her voice cracked. The morning I found him, there was a ring mark in the blood. Your family's crest. Luca's jaw tightened. When? 3 years ago. March 15th. His eyes narrowed in recognition. I was in Europe then. But my brother... He paused, pieces clicking into place. He wore our father's ring that spring. Elena's hands began to shake. You're saying, my brother killed your father, then hired you to kill me. Luca's voice was gentle but firm. He used your grief as a weapon. Tears slid down Elena's cheeks. I don't know what to believe anymore. Luca reached out, cupping her chin with calloused fingers. I promise you, we'll uncover the truth. His touch was tender, at odds with his dangerous reputation. The intimacy of the moment crackled between them, breaking down the last of their emotional barriers. Elena found herself leaning into his touch, trust slowly replacing suspicion. But then Luca's phone buzzed. His men had cracked her encrypted device. His expression darkened as he read the screen. The contract, he said, voice turning cold. You only accepted it 5 days ago. He stepped back, betrayal etched across his features. Was everything just manipulation? Getting close to me, making me trust you? Elena reached for him, desperate to explain, but he was already retreating, the warmth in his eyes replaced by frost. The truth of her recent contract hung between them like a blade, severing their newfound connection just as it had begun to flourish. The fire's warmth couldn't thaw the ice between them as Elena stepped forward, her hands raised in supplication. I took that contract before I knew the whole truth. Things changed when... Save it! Luca's voice cut through the air like steel. He stood rigid, jaw clenched, staring at the encrypted files on his phone. 5 days. You've been playing me this whole time. That's not... Elena's protest was interrupted by Luca's phone buzzing again. His expression shifted as he read the message from his scout. My brother's accelerating his timeline, he muttered, more to himself than her. Your presence has forced his hand. Elena watched him pace, the distance between them growing with each step. The weight of his distrust pressed against her chest until she could barely breathe. She knew then he would never see past the contract, never separate her from his brother's betrayal. As dusk approached, Elena made her decision. She waited until Luca stepped outside to check the perimeter, then slipped silently through the back door. She took only what she needed, a combat knife and her handgun. The odds of surviving a confrontation with his brother alone were slim, but she had to try. Luca discovered her absence minutes later, his fist connected with the cabin wall, splintering wood. Damn it! He grabbed his phone, barking orders to his men while gathering weapons. She's heading for my brother's compound. Track her movements. Meanwhile, Elena crept through the growing darkness, using every skill her training had taught her. The brothers' compound loomed ahead, its security lights cutting through the twilight. She pressed herself against a tree, counting guards and mapping entry points. Behind her, Luca's voice crackled over multiple radio channels, his tone deadly. Tracker, I'm coming. He loaded his weapons with mechanical precision, his earlier betrayal morphing into determination. He wouldn't let her face this alone, whether she wanted his help or not. Elena moved like a shadow through the compound's exterior, her training allowing her to slip past the first layer of guards. The confidence was short-lived. As she rounded a corner, floodlights blazed to life, blinding her. A dozen armed men materialized from the darkness. Right on schedule, a voice sneered. The brothers' men had been waiting. They stripped her weapons and dragged her to an ornate office where Luca's brother sat behind a mahogany desk. His first punch split her lip. The second cracked against her ribs. Where is my dear brother hiding? He grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Elena spat blood onto his expensive shoes. Go to hell! Each blow that followed brought clarity rather than pain. She thought of Luca's gentle touch while bandaging her arm, his protective stance during firefights, the trust he'd shown by bringing her into his inner circle. She'd never appreciated it until now. Outside the compound, Luca and his elite team breached the perimeter fence. They moved with lethal efficiency, silencing guards before they could raise alarms. A whispered voice came through Luca's earpiece. Boss, they've taken her to the main hall. The brothers gathering everyone for a public execution. Luca's face hardened to granite. Begin the diversion. In the main hall, Elena's knees hit marble floors as spotlights burned down. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the polished stone. Luca's brother addressed the gathered crowd, his voice echoing. My brother thinks he can protect everyone, but he'll be too late to save his pet assassin. Elena lifted her chin defiantly, refusing to show fear. The brother raised his gun to her temple. A massive explosion rocked the building's foundation, sending chandeliers swaying and people stumbling. Smoke began pouring through ventilation shafts as emergency. Lights flashed red. The brother's smirk faltered. Luca had arrived. Chaos exploded through the main hall as Luca burst through the doors, his rage visible in every lethal movement. Guards fell before him like dominoes, unable to stop his relentless advance. His eyes locked onto Elena, determination etched into every line of his face. Kill her! The brother screamed, and his closest bodyguard raised his weapon toward Elena's head. Time seemed to slow. Luca lunged forward, throwing himself between Elena and the bullet. The impact threw him sideways, blood blooming across his shirt, but he kept fighting. His hands never stopped moving, his gun never stopped firing. Elena rolled away from her captors in the chaos, fingers closing around a fallen guard's pistol. She rose to her knees, steadied her aim, and found the brother in her sights. Justice for her father, for Luca, for herself. It all converged in that moment. She pulled the trigger. The brother crumpled, the coup ending with a single shot. Luca! Elena scrambled to where he lay, pressing her trembling hands against his wound. Tears streamed down her face as she begged him to stay with her. His blood-stained fingers brushed her cheek. I believed you, he whispered hoarsely. Even when I was angry, I knew you were mine. I don't want to run anymore, she confessed, leaning into his touch. I want to stay with you. Medical teams swarmed in, working quickly to stabilize him. Through it all, Luca refused to let go of her hand. Weeks later, Elena sat beside Luca in his restored office, his wound healed and his power firmly reinstated. She'd been officially introduced as his partner in both business and life, her skills now dedicated to protecting their shared empire. Luca pulled her into his lap, his lips brushing against hers. You're mine, Elena, he murmured possessively, and I protect what's mine. She smiled against his mouth, knowing their future, though forged in danger, was unbreakably theirs. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.